We have lots to discuss in today's video, including an article from the Hockey News suggesting a trade between the Rangers and Sabres that could see former first overall pick Alexis Lafreniere change teams. We'll discuss how that could play out and if something both teams should pursue. Plus, we have some trade talk around the Toronto Maple Leafs. We also have some updates around a couple of key contract extensions, including Connor McDavid with the Edmonton Oilers, Marco Rossi with the Minnesota Wild, and we also have a big update as well on Kirby Dach and his health and whether or not he'll be ready to start the upcoming 25-26 NHL season. Some interesting comments from Kyle Dubas on his time in Toronto. Plus, we also have a surprise signing in Detroit, signing another veteran defenseman. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss in today's video. Before we jump into the news and some of the rumors around the NHL, I just want to take a quick minute here and acknowledge an anniversary. Today is the 14th year, 14 years ago today, that we lost former NHLer Rick Rypien. Of course, Rick, well-respected player, certainly we had a stretch of time there, back a number of years ago where we lost a number of NHLers, especially guys that kind of fell into that, tough guy kind of category, guys who were fighting a lot. Some dealt with mental health issues and whatnot. And I know there's a ways to go for sure, but certainly a lot of programs have been put in place since then. And I know there's a lot of players around the NHL still that are well connected to Rick Rypien. Certainly miss him a lot. So certainly want to just acknowledge, the 14th year anniversary of his passing. So thinking of him today. On to some other news around the NHL. Veteran NHLer Pat Maroon, who just retired from the NHL, is now getting into the world of coaching. Maroon today was announced as an assistant coach for the upcoming 25-26 season in the USHL for the Muskegon Lumberjacks. So obviously that's a pretty, high level. That's equivalent to the major junior leagues in Canada. It's pretty high level hockey for somebody who's never coached. That's a pretty good starting point. Obviously, Maroon, has tons of experience as a player, which is certainly invaluable, which is, allows a lot of guys to kind of skip a lot of steps and start at a higher level. I mean, we've seen guys like, look at Marty St. Louis, for example, head coach in the NHL without really having, he coached youth hockey, and that was it, right? Daniel Alfredson, had assistant coach on the Sens bench, and again, he had coached his sons in their youth levels in AAA hockey, but that's as high as it went. But the experience they have as players is just, like I said, completely invaluable, and it allows them to sometimes start higher. But nice to see Maroon get into coaching and still be connected to the game. I think he's got a lot to offer, and we'll see how things go and if the coaching thing is something that works out for him on a longer-term basis. A couple of signings here today as well. The Columbus Blue Jackets have signed RFA Damon Hunt. He gets a 1-year, 2-way deal. Nothing too shocking or surprising there. But we did get a big surprise out of Detroit. I actually, when I saw this, had to do like a double take, look it up on multiple places to make sure that it wasn't a prank, that it wasn't like it was a legit piece of news. But it is. The Detroit Red Wings have signed veteran NHL defenseman Travis Hamonic to a 1-year deal at $1 million. I honestly thought Hamonic was going to be done. I'm happy for him as a player. Now, Travis Hamonic spent the last 3.5 years in Ottawa. Prior to that, he was in Vancouver for a while. Was a longtime Calgary Flame, New York Islander. Heck of a person, hard worker, and from all accounts, from what I can tell, obviously I don't know Travis Hamonic personally, but from what I've seen behind the scenes and everything that we've heard other colleagues of his say, he's just a real good dude and a real good, just hardworking, good role model kind of guy, good family man. Lots of good positive things we can say about that. But unfortunately for Travis Hamonic, the last couple of years have been pretty rough on him in the NHL. And I just really didn't know that he was going to get an opportunity. I thought maybe a PTO. You could tell at the end of last season in Ottawa that he was kind of acting like when he was on the ice and stuff during practice, or even during like the last regular season game he played, he looked like a guy who knew it's probably over and trying to soak it in. You can tell sometimes when players don't, know their careers are probably done. In some cases, they know for sure. In some cases, they know it's probably right. Now, Detroit, I just don't think this makes any sense for them. Like, they've already got enough veteran defensemen that really can't play at the NHL level. So, like I said, as much as I like Hamonic as a person, he has been a player that it just constantly gets hemmed in and just, I'm sorry, like he's just not an NHL defenseman anymore. He had a time when he was pretty decent, had a good start with the Islanders, was a good young player there, had a decent stretch in Calgary, and even, you could argue that during his time in Vancouver and maybe the first little bit with the Senators, he was still okay. But the last 2 years have been rough. Very rough. And trust me, I've seen every Senators game. I've seen this guy play a lot. And like I said, I have a lot of respect for him, but I just don't understand what Steve Yzerman is doing. You already have Justin Hall, who you shouldn't be playing. And now you're going to try to add Hamonic. If both these guys are in the lineup at the same time, they are screwed. Like, this is just horrible Yzerplan signing. So, they got Jacob Bernard-Docker. The other thing is just a really crazy how many former Senators they have now as well. I think they have 8 guys that have been connected to Ottawa between DeBrincat. Then, of course, they've got Tarasenko's gone now, but he was there. And then, of course, now they got JBD and Hamonic on the back end. They got Austin Watson, Tyler Mott. Just a number of guys that played in Ottawa and ended up moving on to Detroit afterwards. But looking at the blue line now, I mean, you get Seider, who's pretty good. I like Simon Edvinsson. Albert Johansson, I think, still has room to get better, but I think he's pretty decent. But after that, they have some big holes in that blue line. You've got Sherratt, who I don't think has done exceptionally well. You've got Justin Hall. You got the guys like JBD, who might be able to lock down a third pair spot. You get Hamonic. I think Gustafson's still there. I don't know. There's not many guys that can play defense. I just don't understand this whatsoever. I really thought that not only would they not bring in Hamonic, but I thought Hall would be gone too, and he's not. I know Jacob Bernard-Docker was a player that I know a lot of Ottawa Senators fans really appreciated, and had, I know personally, through social media, you always seen a lot of them kind of complaining that he should be playing more ahead of Hamonic. And it's just Hamonic was one of those guys, especially during DJ Smith's time, that just absolutely loved this guy and overplayed him by all means. And now Bernard-Docker is going to be in a situation where he's competing with Hamonic again for that third pair D spot on the right side. He probably feels like it's Groundhog Day. But yeah, I don't know what Yzerman's doing. I like Hamonic as a person, but this is absolutely ridiculous and not what they need whatsoever. I'm shocked by this news. Now, it is a very low-risk, short-term contract. I don't believe they gave him a no-move clause, because I know Ottawa did that on his contract from a couple of years ago, which was a problem. So he can go on waivers. He could be traded. We'll see. I mean, from that perspective, it's okay, you can get out of this. You can bury him in the minors. You can trade him. You can waive him. You can do whatever. And it's not going to, potentially not hurt you any. But it's still money spent in a roster spot given on somebody who, at this point in their career, to me, is just not a regular NHL player. So, yeah, that's my rant on Detroit. I don't know what they're doing. Doesn't make any sense, and it was a bad move. Sorry. That's just the way I feel about it. Kyle Dubas made some interesting comments during a podcast interview with Cam Jansen and Andy Strickland on the Cam and Strick show, confirming, which we had heard behind the scenes as speculation before, but now we can say it's not just a rumor, it's the truth, that back in 2017, he almost left the Toronto Maple Leafs to become the general manager of the Colorado Avalanche. He was very much in the running for that job. Of course, we know now what happened, and he ultimately the job with the Joe Sakic, and of course the Avalanche went on a heck of a run. But yeah, he was the assistant general manager with the Leafs. He was still very much viewed an up and coming young, I don't know what they would, genius or whatever they want to refer to him at. But I know when he was at that stage of his career was kind of, the brainiac that everybody wanted to work with, right? And the Leafs were quite high on him, and it was actually Leafs general manager Lou Lamoriello who talked him into staying. He had conversations with Lou, and Lou kind of suggested that if he stay and work his way to being the general manager of that team, he already knows all the players, he knows the inner workings of the organization, and it just would be an easier transition and allow him for more success rather than already to jump to a new team and try to learn everything from scratch and all the players and everything like that, that it would probably be best for him to stay. And of course, not too long after that, Lou ended up again, handing the title over to Dubas, not really at his own free will, mind you, but that's how things went down. But I think there's probably some people that might wish Dubas took that job in Colorado, and that things changed and were different with the Leafs. As much as there were some good things, there was a lot of things that went wrong during the Dubas era, for sure. The negotiations with the RFAs and those contracts, signing John Tavares, you can make an argument for sure that I don't care. You can say Tavares has been productive for them and whatever you want. I still don't think that was the best use of that money. And I don't really think that's what they needed. And I think that contract set them up to lose the negotiations with Matthews, Marner, and Nylander. So, yeah, anyways, that was definitely some things that didn't go well for Dubas during his time in Toronto. And interesting to know that it almost never happened in the first place. Had that one decision been different. Now, we also got a big update today on Kirby Dach in Montreal. Another update from Max Truman, and with comments from GM Ken Hughes confirming essentially that Kirby Dach seems pretty unlikely to be ready to start the NHL season. But the comment from Hughes says essentially that their hope is that he's ready to either start at the beginning of the season or some point early in the fall. But of course, we know that he had a second straight ACL injury to his right knee. It's a big recovery, and obviously something that's going to be treated with a lot of delicacy, and want to make sure that he's not overdoing it, doing things the right way, so make sure he doesn't screw up that knee any worse, for the future, right? But I would say, based on all the speculation, everything we've heard about, where he's at with his recovery, I really don't think there's a good chance that he's going to be ready to start the year. And this comment from Ken Hughes kind of sort of confirms that. So to me, I think they're likely starting, barring a trade. Guys like Newhook and Evans are going to end up being elevated in the lineup. You're going to see guys like Kapanen or Beck or somebody kind of competing for an extra depth spot. I mean, they do have lots of young players that can compete and make it interesting. But yeah, Kirby Dach pretty much guaranteed to not be ready to start training camp and ready to start the season. Marco Rossi is another interesting young RFA centerman that we're watching out of Minnesota. Comments from NHL insider Frank Saravalli suggest that he feels that ultimately, even though it's not really what Rossi wants, that they're going to have to settle on a bridge deal. Like I said, we're not faced with a deadline right now, so deadlines usually what push results. And, until he's at risk to miss games or miss paychecks, they may try to continue to push this to get what they want, but ultimately feels that the kind of leverage is more in the team's favor. And he thinks that a 2-year bridge deal, maybe around $6 million, might be ultimately where they end up meeting as a compromise to get a deal done to get him into the lineup. Now, will he miss time? Will it go that far? It's hard to say. I don't think we can rule that out, though, at this point in time. Lots of speculation as well around Connor McDavid. I know some are kind of hinting that they think a contract extension might actually come together as quickly as next week. Now, of course, that's not a given. It's not a fact by any means, but there are some connected people out there who think that's a possibility. Many people are hoping and think that there's a real good chance, though, that even if it's not next week, that it's before training camp gets too far along and before the season starts. I know John Shannon, a well-connected NHL person has said that he thinks that McDavid's going to sign for less money than what people think. I know some people think it's going to be in that $16 to $17 million range, and most people feel like it's going to be a 4 to 5 year deal. There's a few that think it's going to be maybe a little bit less, maybe even as low as 2 or 3 years. Obviously, the less term he takes will probably bring that AAV down some. There's still some that think that you can't rule out a 7 or 8 year extension either. Although majority of people that are connected and have sources here seem to think that those longer term deals are less likely, that probably at most a 5 year, but 3 and 4 are probably the more common predicted time frames that we're looking at here on a McDavid extension. But obviously, if it happens next week, that would be great news for Edmonton to be able to get this done and have a better long-term outlook on where their cap is going to be, getting their captain and best player in the world locked up on a nice extension. Now, there's also some speculation around the future of Nick Robertson in Toronto. We know he ultimately settled on a contract with the Leafs, but it doesn't mean, like I said, that for sure that he has a long future there. Based on how last season went, I still think that there's a good chance here that Craig Berube ultimately, it maybe doesn't play him a lot. I think we saw last year that the trust doesn't seem to be there on a consistent basis. I think Robertson's been relatively productive given the amount of ice time and opportunity that he gets. I think he did do a decent job of making the most of it. Obviously, there were times when he didn't, and obviously they made changes. But it just seems like they're always usually pretty quick to make changes, and he didn't really get a long, consistent run like I thought he might at times. But ultimately, one article suggests that the Red Wings are a team to watch when it comes to Robertson if he does get moved, citing the fact that they have a lot of veteran players, some of which are injury prone, and we know that the Red Wings are obviously looking to improve themselves and get back to the playoffs. Adding a little bit more youth in their lineup for some secondary scoring might be wise. So we'll see what happens with Robertson in Toronto, and if he does get moved, if Detroit could be a possibility. But I do think that it's I think the odds are decent that Robertson is moved sometime during this 1 year contract period. Now, the other article I want to look at was from the Hockey News, suggesting that we see a significant blockbuster deal between the Rangers and the Sabres, suggesting that the Sabres really push hard for an Alexis Lafreniere trade. Now, we already know they traded J.J. Peterka. We know that they could use another high-scoring winger to replace that. The players they got back were different kind of players, and they might have been fond of what they got, but it was, from an offensive perspective, a little bit underwhelming, you could say. But ultimately, we've heard about Lafreniere, maybe being available. He signed a big extension last year, didn't have a great season. A lot of New York media, including the New York Post, Molly Walker, were suggesting that he could be available for the right trade as well. Maybe a fresh start might be what's needed after all. That the Rangers might be having second thoughts on this contract. And so far this summer, we haven't really seen anything to suggest for sure that the odds are favorable for him to be traded. But this article suggests that even though the Rangers have made a number of changes to their blue line, that they would still be looking to change things further and improve things. And that if the Sabres wanted to add a young defenseman here in the mix, that might intrigue the Rangers enough to pull the trigger. Now, the article thinks that the Rangers would be more likely to look and ask for Owen Power to be moved, but they feel like the Sabres shouldn't do that, that they should counter and kind of push the idea of a Bowen Byram trade for Alexis Lafreniere. Now, we know that Byram would be capable of being, a top pair offensive D-man. We know that Alexis Lafreniere has potential to be a top six, hopefully 60, 70, 80 point winger at some point in his young career. Obviously that's full potential has not yet been realized. But Lafreniere could benefit from a change of scenery. Imagine him maybe on a line with guys like Josh Norris or Tage Thompson or Alex Tuch. He could find some real solid top six players there to play with, and it could really benefit his opportunity to put up points and be productive. So, the Sabres, I know they signed Byram. I still believe they signed short term. I don't think it's still a long-term healthy relationship between both sides, even though they wanted to play that off based on how negotiations went when they get a signing done earlier in the offseason. But all that said, I'm still not convinced that Byram has a long-term tenure with the Sabres. And if they could get a player like Lafreniere back, if I'm Buffalo, I would do that deal all day long. I'm not sure quite how the Rangers feel about it. Obviously, looking at their blue line, they lost Gavrikov, or no. Looking at the Rangers' blue line, we know they lost K'Andre Miller. They brought in Gavrikov, good defenseman, but more of a defensive stalwart back there. You've got Adam Fox. Byram could be the left-handed version of that. You could really maybe balance things out here to add, a good skater, a good puck mover, a good offensive guy on that back end to kind of help kickstart the offense here a little bit. And like I said, it gets a fresh start for Lafreniere. It may not be exactly 1-for-1, but that is the basis here for a trade. If I'm Buffalo, I would be all over that. I don't know for sure that the Rangers would accept, but if I'm the Sabres and I think they're going to go for it, I would at least try it for sure. Even if you had to go Byram and a pick or Byram and a prospect or something, I would still consider doing that. Your blue line with the Rangers, I think they could use a blue liner that's dynamic after losing K'Andre Miller. So, I'm going to try to tackle what I think they need while trying to pry a player away like Lafreniere that I would want to try to get on my team. But I do think that there's a decent possibility that this could make good sense for both sides. But again, hard to say what happens. We know there's going to be a lot more trade talk picked up here before the season starts. And I'd love to know what you think of this suggested trade from the Hockey News article. Should the Rangers and Sabres pursue this type of trade? What are your thoughts on Nick Robertson ending up in Detroit, as well as all the other news that we talked about today, especially the Travis Hamonic signing? I'd really love to know what you think on that one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.